This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Jackie O and you're listening to Militantly Mixed.
Yo, this is Sharmane from the Single Simulcast. And when I'm not making you laugh or making up parody songs, I'm kicking back, listening to Militantly Mixed.
ManeHustle Media podcasts are recorded on the ancestral lands of the Chumash, Tongva, Karankawa, and Hohokam people, and I wish to pay my respects to the people of those nations, both past and present. Konnichiwa, what's up, primos? Welcome to Militantly Mixed, the podcast about race and identity from the mixed race perspective. I am your Sir Auntie, Sharmane Fury, aka Dublation Blurred, and this is episode 201. And I am also just a few days over 2 weeks until I move to Merida, Mexico. I am just a few days until I go to Austin to speak at the BIPOC Pop Fest at UT. And it's a week away until I can get dental surgery, emergency dental surgery, if I can afford it. Needless to say, with it being this close to our move and with all the chaos that has happened over the last week and a half that I can tell you all about, I am like extremely overwhelmed right now. More so, I made room for being overwhelmed at this time. That's why I recorded all my interviews back in December and January, so I can have them edited and ready to go. And all I had to do was record my intros. But yeah, I did get caught. It did catch up to me. So there were still a couple interviews that I had yet to edit. And of course, there's the recording of the intros. I am just beyond overwhelmed at this point. So much has happened in the last week. I don't think I got a chance to say it on last week's episode because I believe I recorded my intro before this. But last Saturday, I was eating a very soft, spicy tuna roll, and my back molar broke. My crown broke, and it broke in such a bad way that I have to now have my whole tooth pulled, which not something I talk about very often. It is a major fear in my life to have my actual permanent teeth pulled out of my head. Number of family members, we don't have the strongest enamel in my family, and I also had bottle rot as a child, which has a permanent impact on your permanent teeth. And so it's been a major fear that eventually I would lose some of my teeth, and I never wanted that to happen, and it's now happened. So I've been dealing with sort of the mental health aspects of having to come to terms with the fact that one of my teeth are going to be pulled. And then on top of that, the dentist at the emergency dental place tried to pull my tooth for about an hour and failed. And in that process, he damaged my cheek, and my jaw is still swollen and in pain a week later. I've still been trying to maintain all my podcasting and all that other kind of stuff that I have to get done. But I've been in extreme pain for the last week and will continue to do so until this tooth is removed, which was supposed to happen today, the day I'm recording. But unfortunately, I can't afford it yet. So I put it back a week while I'm sitting here trying to figure out how to gain an extra $1,600 that I don't have access to pay for my surgery. So needless to say, the combination of being in constant pain and stressed out about the money and stressed out about the move and knowing that I have to speak in a couple of days, and knowing that I also have to squeeze in getting my cats examined because there's this official examination they need to get before we go to Mexico. They either do within, the month prior. Just learning that price is raised to about $300 a cat, and I have 4 cats. I'm just like barely keeping it together because I don't know how to get an extra $2,800 to get me to get me through the next 2 weeks. Like, I don't know where I'm gonna get it, and I'm freaking out. So needless to say, life is stressful. I'm very glad that I got these interviews recorded and mostly edited before this period. But even just where I'm at now, just to finish out March with the show before my mental health hiatus that picks up in April, which was already scheduled and always is. Even just to get me to that is very difficult for me right now. So I'm a little bit overwhelmed. I just want to put that out as a full disclosure thing, because what I have decided in this effort to give myself more grace and room to be a regular ass person, I acknowledge that I have a tendency to stack on myself. I will stack responsibilities or obligations or whatever and just say, I can handle it, I can take it. But I'm trying to not do that to myself as much anymore. And a couple days ago, I kind of realized that overwhelming sensation was getting the better of me. And so I reached out to Teresa to ask if she wouldn't also mind if I extended the submission date to the Be Your Mix as Self anthology, which she did also agree to. So the Be Your Mix as Self anthology is the project of 2023. And the only person creating deadlines for that is myself and Teresa. So with that being the case, there's no reason why I had to have such a hard line in March 15th. I just wanted to give myself some room to be able to start the editing process in April during the mental health hiatus. But managing the submissions even right now is quite a lot. Even though they're not coming in every single day, it does require some effort every time. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of grace, and I am going to extend the submission date to April 15th. And thank you to everybody who has submitted so far, because every time I see a submission comes through, it makes this a reality. It makes this like, oh, this is really finally happening. This thing that I've wanted to do forever is finally happening. Just in the last week, we received a couple extra essay submissions, which has not quite evened us out, but because there are more poems than essays, but I'm happy to see that gap close a little, although I do expect there to be more poetry than essays generally anyway. By nature of length and the fact that people will submit up to 3 poems in some cases. So yeah, we're gonna extend that date. So by the time this episode airs, it should already be on the website, and the Instagram should have the announcement there as well. So for those of you who might have felt like you were a little bit rushed, you now have that little bit of time, that extra month to complete your work, so that we can start our editing and review process, our review and editing process, in late April is when that's going to start now. But I'm so excited we're getting entries in. Right now, it's a kind of a mix between people who I am not familiar with and people who I know in terms of engaging with the show. In terms of the people that I'm not familiar with, from what I understand, the people who have shared the post is the reason why a lot of that has happened. So shout out to Sarah Lotus from the Mixed Bloom Room, Dr. Jen Noble, Blasian March, Mixed Present, Mask, the Multiracial Americans of Southern California, and then just listeners. I've seen some of y'all push and share, not to mention the Militantly Confidential blog as well and platform. So people are finding us because of those shares, and that's going to make this anthology a lot more diverse and broad with all these different stories that we as mixed people have to tell. So again, please go to the militantlymixed.com website and click on the Be Your Mixed as Self Anthology tab at the top of the page. Review all of those guidelines to make sure that your submission will qualify. And then you can pay your submission fee there on the button that's on that page. And then you can send your submission in either Word or PDF. Either way works for me, to Sharmane at militantlymixed.com, which I normally spell out. But if you don't know, just go to the website, because you have to go to the website anyway to even do your submission. So, boom. But again, thank you so much for people that are participating in it. And so far, it's really been like heartening to know that this thing is going to happen. And I'm very grateful for that. And before we get into today's episode, I do want to remind y'all that Militantly Mixed is a fan-sponsored podcast, and it is with the support of the fans that the show is even possible to keep going at the moment. If you would like to support the show, you can donate as low as $1 a month to as high as anything you wish, and there are different reward levels depending on what you choose. And let me tell you, the more dollar a month folks we get, the more stable Militantly Mixed is. And I'm seriously, like, if I had $100 a month sponsors, the show would feel a lot more stable than it does at the moment, because I actually have a lot of 20, 50, and $100, or not a lot, but I have 20, 50, and $100 sponsors. And when something happens in their life and they have to pull out for a month or two, that has a really big impact on the show, which just recently happened. Which it swings us back into that danger zone of, okay, now I got to figure out what to sell so that I can pay for the show this month. Hopefully we'll get those folks back. I did get a message from one of them that said it was a temporary thing. But for those of you who are listening right now, given how many people we have that listen to the show, if even just 100 of you could donate $1 a month or $12 a year, that would help really with the stability of Militantly Mixed. So I encourage that if you enjoy this show, if it gives you life in any way, shape, or form, if even a single episode was very meaningful, if you wouldn't mind considering donating on Patreon at $1 a month, because it will really help keep us going and growing. And to do that, you go to patreon.com/militantlymix. That link is in the show notes as well for you, or you can click a link to it on the Militantly Mix website. And again, that's just how you keep the show going and growing. If you would like to drop some coins in the tip jar and not necessarily participate in a monthly sponsorship, you can go to paypal.me/militantlymix, which is also linked in the show notes, and drop some coins in that tip jar. I do have some folks that do that kind of regularly, and I appreciate that as well. It all goes into the same bank account for Militantly Mix to keep us going and growing. And that in addition to maybe buying a t-shirt or a mug on the Militantly Mix website are the ways that you can kind of help the show financially. And now that we're being hosted on Anchor, you can also click the listener support link on the anchor.fm/Militantly Mix page, also linked in the show notes, in case you want to sponsor the show that way. But Patreon is the way where rewards actually happen. Other support is just direct support of the show without also sending out rewards and things like that. All right. Let's get into today's episode. My guest today is Kiyoto, a fellow mixed Japanese person, a person of Japanese and white American heritage mix. On a personal level, as a mixed Japanese person, the reason why it's always so meaningful for me to connect with other mixed Japanese is because for every mixed Japanese person I meet, I get a further insight into Japaneseness that I just don't have access to in my small window of Japaneseness. Japanese, unlike a lot of other Asian cultures, we tend to assimilate when we go elsewhere. And so getting that dedicated, rich cultural experience within a community doesn't happen for a lot of us that are Japanese or mixed Japanese here in the United States in particular. And so I have a very small bubble of my Japanese grandma and some of my extended family in Hawaii. But beyond that, I didn't really get to participate in a broader Japanese cultural experiences if my family was not present. So every time I meet another mixed Japanese, that's why I get so enthusiastic about it, because with every conversation I have, I learn something that I did not get exposed to growing up. And speaking with Kiyoto is no different. The insights that they shared with me on this discussion really even has me assessing like how to prepare myself for when I have my Japanese experience in Japan, when I can get out there eventually. Two things that I want to highlight is there's a few times that we use some Japanese words really context free for each other in our conversation because we're both Japanese and we understand this part of the language. But I realized we didn't translate those words in the discussion. I realized that after the editing process. So I have a few words that I'm going to define for you here. Some of them you can have gathered from context, but some we did not clarify. And so if you don't have the context, I wanted to make sure that I shared those with you. And some of those words you've heard me say before as well. And whether or not I've defined them, I don't know. So I'm going to do it all here. The first word is hafu. Hafu was used by Kiyoto early on as a way of that other people are identifying them. And basically, it's just the English word half with a Japanese pronunciation. And it has now been adopted within Japanese culture to express a mixed Japanese person. Now, depending on the way it is used, though, sometimes it can be used in derision or to divide a mixed Japanese person, to separate them from a quote, full Japanese person, or real, quote, real Japanese person. And sometimes people own that term in sort of a reclamation type of way, and find some form of empowerment in it. So I would say that if you're not of Japanese heritage and you're not used to using this word, make sure that the person that you're speaking to that is mixed Japanese lets you know if they are comfortable with this term or not. Hafu just means half in English, but is now adopted by the Japanese language. Now, the term I use for half, or the term my family uses, is hanbun, which does mean half in Japanese. It is the Japanese word for half. So we would describe my mother and her sisters, say, as hanbun nihonjin, meaning half Japanese. When you put jin at the end of a descriptor that is either racial, ethnic, or nationality, you're expressing that you're talking about a person in this case. So the type of people that we describe in this episode, Nihonjin, Japanese person. Hakujin, white person. Kokojin, black person. Amerikajin, American person. So we do say Amerikajin and we do say Hakujin in describing Kyoto's mother. And then, of course, you may have heard me on the show many times describe myself as Kokojin, Nihonjin, or even Hakujin to a degree, because that is my mix. Two other words that come up that I don't use but I am aware of is either kwahu or kwota. These are descriptors of mixed Japanese people that are a quarter if we're going into percentage conversation. Kwafu is just an attempt to match hafu. It doesn't make any sense. There's no connection to it in either English or Japanese. It's just been like, we're just associating these two words together and putting together. I don't use it because it seems like nonsense to me. I also try not to talk in terms of percentages anymore. And so that's another reason why it's nonsense to me. Kota is not unlike hafu in that it's really just the English word for quarter pronounced in a Japanese way and has been adopted within Japanese society as a useful word to describe how Japanese you might be. And I say all of that in quotations. So kota was another word that came up. The way that I had been taught to describe myself as a quarter Japanese, which I technically am, is yonbon no ichi, meaning one of four. And so like literally a quarter. So if in my family, the way we would have been described as yonbon ni ichi nihonjin, meaning we are a quarter Japanese. Again, I stay away from percentages now, but it is part of the conversation that we had. So I wanted to make sure y'all knew the words we were using in case we didn't define them. Some of them we did and some of them we did not. And the last one that I will express is Nikke, which is sort of a Japanese person either born or raised outside of Japan. I think of this term, and I might be incorrect, but I do believe that this term is really used to describe the first generation of person that is outside of Japan, although it is possible that it may suit even for someone like my grandmother who was raised in Japan but then left and hasn't been back in 60 years. Possibly she might be presumed as a Nikke if she were to go back. Whether or not that is accurate, it's an assumption that Japanese people would put on a Japanese person that might not be quoting as quote real Japanese, because they clearly show an influence of being outside of the culture in some way, shape, or form. What we don't talk about in this episode, but in a broader conversation, when you talk about what generation of person you are raised outside of Japan, Nisei, Sansei, those are generations of people. So I would be described as a Sansei because I'm the third generation person here. My grandmother is Issei because she's from Japan. My mother is Nisei because she's second generation of Japanese person here, but first generation born in the United States. And I'm Sansei because I'm third generation here, but second generation born here in the United States. We don't talk about that, but it's I'm separating that from Nikke because it's a different type of designator. And again, this is something that people put on us probably. Some of it are descriptors of the time and generation that we are, and some of it is really just a way to separate us, a way to say you're not coding as quote real Japanese, and so I need to figure out where you are in this. And so Nikke could be one of those ways, and I feel like we need to tell you if that's what we are. rather than you telling us if that's what we are. Same with hafu or hanbun or kota or whatever. We're Japanese people. We just happen to be mixed, and that's a difference. And so I say that also to bring up a quote that Kiyoto does say in this episode, which I don't want to get lost because it was beautiful. And that is that mixed people deserve monoracial people to expand their view. Meaning, if I tell you I am ethnically Black, Japanese, and British white, but I identify culturally as Black and Japanese, you need to accept that as the view that you perceive me in versus whatever you've decided for me. And that is something actually that a lot of mixed Japanese struggle with, because Japanese from Japan, or even monoracial Japanese that were born in Japan but grew up here, or but come here, do treat us like we're very, very different from them. When in a case of someone like Kiyoto, who grew up in Japan, his entire up until that point, identity would have been Japanese. He just happened to have a white mother. And so to say that somehow he's not getting full cultural Japaneseness is just wrong and inaccurate and insane. So again, to quote Kiyoto, mixed people deserve monoracial people to expand their view. And that is what today's episode is called. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our latest primo, or itoko, because it's Japanese, to the Militantly Mixed family, Kiyoto. Oh, wait, one last thing. One more ado. Kiyoto actually published a book recently called Python for Chemistry. I'm going to put a link in the show notes for that. So if that is an intersection of information and knowledge that you would be interested in, Python, the coding language, and chemistry, please check on that link and help support a fellow cousin in their work out on these streets. Okay, again, please welcome our latest cousin to the Militantly Mixed family, Kiyoto. I am joined by Kiyoto today. Kiyoto, why don't you introduce yourself and let's get into it.
Hello. Thanks for having me on the show. It's wonderful to meet you, Sharmane. I'm currently a postdoc in the math department at the university, and I am a mixed Japanese. My father is from Japan, and my mother is white with U.S. nationality.
So I only know a couple of folks that are where their fathers are the Japanese parent, and just what little I know about you already, you have very similar things going on. So at one point we'll talk a little bit about maybe the difference of having a Japanese mother or grandmother versus a Japanese father. So you're studying math, and what's your future goal? What's the
Oh, I've just completed my PhD this year,
Okay.
and I'm
awesome.
looking to start working for a pharmaceutical company. So I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah. So let's get into a little bit of just kind of where you start in your mixedness. Growing up with parents from two different countries, and I'm assuming bouncing probably between or visiting one at a time and things like that. What did you understand about yourself as a mixed kid with parents from two different places?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I guess my identity hasn't always been mixed Japanese, and it took a lot of years of reflection and experiences to eventually arrive to the point that I am. And I was born in Michigan when my father was completing his master's in Michigan, and then we moved to Japan. So my earliest memories are from Japan and growing up in Japan. So, and there's or growing up, I would be referred to as hafu for describing somebody who's mixed with a Japanese parent and a non-Japanese parent. So growing up, I always had the sense surrounded by other Japanese people that I might have the Japanese papers or memories and experiences and family, but it didn't. I felt there was an emphasis on the part that distinguished me. So growing up, I thought what that meant was that I was white and hafu. So when I
White versus like Americajin?
uh, to me, the only white person I knew growing up was my mother and my two grandparents who I visited. So to me, or as a child, I didn't have a good distinguishing of what Americajin represented and what
Oh,
Hafu
okay. So like
represented.
they might have been saying both type of thing,
Yeah,
or
that's right.
essentially non. So in my time, because I know I'm quite a bit older than you, we were hambun. Like that was kind of the way. Hafu hadn't happened yet. Like the terminology hadn't happened yet.
I
And
see.
and my mother and her siblings are hafu. And I guess it's not as popular, but there's the kwafu, which I don't think works.
Uh-huh.
But the Yonbonichi, I guess,
Oh, okay, got it.
which is more this is what I am,
Uh-huh.
and so, but that's easy. It's not easy to walk around and watashi wa
Yeah.
Yonbonichi desu.
Uh-huh.
So for us, it was Americajin. Like
Oh, I
our
see.
family, even our Japanese family who came to the States, the same thing. They would refer to us as like that was how they paid attention to, or that's how they accepted us. So we weren't even like really able to say, like I'm Japanese. They'd say like you weren't born there. Why do you think? Why do you think you're Japanese? So in your
I see.
case, were you going to school with Japanese children or a mix or American children?
Uh, I think I knew maybe uh, one or two mixed students, but I was in the public school with the majority monoracial Japanese kids. So that was my upbringing. I was in Yokohama, Japan, which is very close to Tokyo. And I moved to the US when I was 15 years old. I guess like the references I had was like visiting my grandparents and like watching movies. So that was quite different. When I arrived to the US, I guess those were the references and everything was quite new. And I spoke with my mother in English at home, but so I thought I could communicate just fine. But once I arrived, I had a lot of trouble communicating. And I remember spending a long time with homework, which involved reading. I actually couldn't, or I had to sound out each words to read at the time, and yeah, so
Because
um,
there's not a lot of crossover. Like the
yeah,
consonant vowel sounds can be so different that the sounding
that's
out
right.
process can be very frustrating going
That's right.
into English from Japanese for sure.
That's right.
So
And
did they put you in English as a second language courses and stuff when you got here?
that's right. And that was a very helpful part in my high school. So it was just for the first year, but I remember, yes, that was a very nice experience. So
So
and
as you
uh
grew out of like high school and stuff like that and going into college, were you still dealing with the like what's the best word for it? The I guess that the constant translation that might be
uh
happening when you're reading.
That's a good point. I think I was able to adapt enough in the first year to not have the language barrier. And I think there was a fairly large cultural barrier I still need to work through. So I don't know, I just didn't, or it might be part of being a young person, but just I didn't know how to conduct myself or I don't know, something I observed with or learning to speak was you need to give like answers which are expected because otherwise it I don't know, it like disrupts the conversation. And
Right.
yeah, so like kind of learning those cues or expectations or references was
Right.
I remember being a challenge for me.
Mm.
So, and also arriving in Michigan, I was in a area with a large amount of white people, and that gave me more of a reference to understand um, that my mother's experience was quite different from kind of, I guess, the collective experience of that gave me more of a context of American identity and racial identity. And I realized that I've been collapsing my mother's identity into being a white foreigner rather than fully without a full understanding. So, and my mother was born in Colombia, and right now I'm visiting her birthplace in Medellin.
Okay.
So that's been,
So she
uh-huh,
is a Hakujin, but she was just born in Colombia.
that's right.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I'm sure that's a big story too. So you said at the beginning that you didn't really have like necessarily a Japanese or like mixed Japanese identity.
Yeah,
Was it coming to the States that made you more aware of your Japaneseness,
that's
or
right.
that's how you feel that was
That's
going on?
right. So, because I guess growing up, it was constantly being told, "Oh, but you're mixed or half, right?" Or "Oh, but you're American, right?" And I just kind of accepted it as given. But once I arrive, I realize, this isn't that this identity is different, and the Japanese identity, the mixed identity, those were things that I began to have to assert or claim as I was, or later than my childhood.
When do you think you started to well, I guess let me just ask more directly. How do you feel like you identify yourself now?
I identify myself as mixed Japanese.
Okay.
So there was a bad experience when I was working in Japan last year. I just arrived for an internship from the US, and I didn't have my insurance card. I had a grace period after arriving, but it was COVID, so there was a 2 week wait time, and with the understanding of it can't be applied for immediately after arrival. So, and that I just moved into my apartment and I needed a mug. So I went shopping, and then I got stopped by the police who asked me to present my documentation. And they just couldn't wrap their mind around that I'm Japanese and that I just arrived from the States. And that's why I haven't, I don't have those documentations, and I'm not walking
Right.
around with a passport. so,
Right.
and so I would try to explain, or I was speaking in Japanese and at the time, and I'm just saying, yes, I'm Japanese, and they just weren't accepting it. So,
Yeah.
like, so with racial profiling, the police are very pushy in Japan. So, because this older officer didn't accept my answer, he would just keep rephrasing and then putting his own thoughts of what I am. So he was saying, okay, so you were in America and then you became Japanese and then you're here. Or like,
Yeah.
and that just went on, and it was so frustrating that, they wouldn't answer why they stopped me, or the way they were talking was also kind of aggressive. Um, and it got to a point where I was so frustrated, and he said, "Oh, you're Nikke." Nikke is a foreign-born Japanese, or foreign with Japanese roots, which I am not. I am just Japanese.
Yeah.
So, but I just gave up in that moment and just said yes, just to like have him like
Just to be able to
like
get out of
that's
that.
right.
Yeah.
And that was a weight that followed me the entire time I was there, that this person made me give up who I am
Right.
because he couldn't his worldview didn't have a space for my experience.
It's so hard. Like, I try to explain it too. I mean, even just being American born, mixed Japanese,
Mhm.
your own family, in my case, are
Yeah,
telling me I'm not Japanese. But I'm from
yeah,
America, where my mindset is that your ethnicity is what you're explaining.
yeah, that's
But
right.
for them, it's their nationality. But also, if you're Hafu, then
Mhm.
the foreign is bigger than the Japanese, which
Yeah.
I'm so baffled by this idea
Mhm.
of just like, do Japanese not value our own bloodline so much? Like, is it so much smaller than every other bloodline that you're automatically what the other half
Mhm.
is?
Mhm. Mhm.
And it doesn't matter if your mother is the white parent or your father is the
Mhm.
white parent or any other race. You're
Yeah,
just that. You're not
yeah,
Japanese. And that is so, it's not unsimilar to what we have in the United States, the one drop rule for
yeah,
the
that's right.
descendants of African enslavement, which was a tool used to keep black people
Yep.
under control. And so it's just the idea of being one drop of black blood makes you black. So even if it's 4 generations back,
Mhm.
you're black. It's like the opposite of that in Japan. It's like, even if it's a little bit of non-Japanese, that's what
Mhm.
you are.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Like, it's one of these problems that I can't explain it well. Like, I can explain it to non-Japanese, but
Mhm.
Japanese will understand of just like, we're not. I
Mhm.
mean, even if you were full ethnically Japanese but born here, same
Mhm.
problem.
Mhm. Yep,
You would
that's
be
right.
viewed as non-Japanese. So
That's right.
it's pretty wild.
And yeah, that's another thing. Like, there's these boxes that people with like either foreign roots or experiences get put in. So, like, if you're mixed, it's like, okay, specify what mix. It's Hafer or Quota, or if it's like a different birthplace and then return to Japan, then oh, but you're returnee. So like there's all these caveats that put to distinguish from, I guess, what I wrongly would describe as like pure or authentic Japanese identity. And like the what I realized was that I or that's just such a small way to think of like, people deviate a little bit from what's expected, and then suddenly they're like they bear this lifelong label that's not even
Right.
their choice. Whereas like Japan has extensive history of like trade with Europe, and migration to South America, and unfortunate involvement in the World War II, and that accompanies like different stories of that don't neatly fit into this one supreme thought of what Japanese identity needs to be,
Right.
I guess.
So did having an experience like that kind of fuel more of the assertion going forward, that the way you identify as mixed Japanese is
Uh-huh.
like, hear me say this, I am mixed Japanese.
That's right. So I intentionally never say my mix as being half or some percent or part, because that what that does is try to break me apart into monoracial identities
Right.
for other people to more easily understand. But I think mixed people deserve monoracial folks to expand the
They're
worldview
thinking,
too.
yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
absolutely. And for us, like, I growing up in my whole life, we were
Mhm.
always like, we were the different ones.
I see.
And I hate that idea, and it took into adulthood for me to start saying that everybody was different from me,
Mm,
because
mhm.
I'm the main character of my story.
Yep.
Like,
Right.
how is it that I'm the person I have to live with every single day, but I'm
Mhm.
going to tell you I'm different? No, you're different.
That's
I'm
right.
living with me. And we're like actually more, not less. So that
Mhm.
idea that we become less of whatever monoracial groups
Yeah.
our parents come from,
Yeah.
is always a big part of frustration. So I'm glad to hear that you're asserting it more. I'm sad that you had to experience that, and knowing that it'll probably happen again.
Mhm.
Just because the culture, like, I don't think U.S. Americans really can understand how homogenous Japan is. compared to even with the U.S. being predominantly white in most
Uh-huh.
spaces that people would travel, you
Uh-huh.
still don't understand that
Yeah,
kind of homogeny until you're experiencing it really
that's
on the
right.
Asian side probably.
Hmm.
Although there's a lot of other places where most everybody is monoracial in some place.
Hmm.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about your
Uh-huh.
experiences in Japan. You've had some issues with
Uh-huh.
like in workplace, but like in terms of say positive aspects of your identity,
Yeah.
being both sort of experiencing a
Uh-huh.
multinational experience, experiencing multicultural, multi
Hmm.
ethnic, and things like that.
Hmm. I want to highlight like all the great things there's been with being mixed, and one of it was once I come to the U.S. and realized my mother's experience was quite different from the people I've met. That caused me to reflect more and try to understand more from my where my mother was coming from, and I had a great opportunity to visit Colombia with her in 2019, right before the pandemic.
Oh,
So yeah,
that pandemic messed all of us up so
it
much,
was. I had so
derailed so
many
many things.
plans. So, but yeah, it was really amazing to see like Bogota and Medellin, where she grew up, and it led me more to learn about the culture she grew up in Colombia, as well as learning Spanish. And I'm very lucky to be able to spend more time in Colombia now. So I'm very grateful of that.
So I've heard, well, from my first Japanese teacher, but a couple other people since then, that Japanese to Spanish is a lot easier than Japanese to English, and that some people,
Uh-huh.
like my Japanese teacher from college, he tried to learn English and he struggled, so he learned Spanish first because there's a lot of shared
Really?
sounds and
Uh-huh.
in some cases words, and then he learned English from Spanish.
Interesting.
So
That's
so when he translates, he has to translate back through three different languages in one go. Can you
uh-huh.
imagine like the frustration
Impressive.
of your brain?
Also so strategic, like I yeah, like that's so intentional. And
I
yeah.
know. Have you in
So
Colombia? Have you stumbled on mixed Japanese there? Because there, from what I understand, there's a pretty large population of Japanese there as well.
I haven't but also I haven't been long enough to really make connections or to yeah.
And there's
Um
still a pandemic going on. We go outside sometimes now instead of no times.
there's that too. Yeah. So
So your mom
um
actually has a pretty
mhm,
interesting experience in that she grew up, or born
mhm,
in Colombia, grew up with Colombian culture,
uh-huh.
but is American, and then married
Uh-huh.
a Japanese and lived in Japan too. So,
Yeah.
like, what's
Mhm.
her defining culture then? Does she assign herself Colombia as a identity?
I think American, just because she's been in the US for such a long time. But yeah, then again, she's been in Japan for such a long time too. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess like, but I guess like American is the most concise answer for that. But yeah, it was much later in life that I learned about third culture kids, TCKs.
Yeah.
Um, and I realized like how nuanced that experience might be. So I'm still a or I'm still learning to speak Spanish, but my aunt is fluent in Spanish, and I just never questioned growing up my aunt on my
Oh, like
father's side.
why?
So yeah, and like I asked my mother as a grown up in my 20s, why does Noriko speak Spanish? And my mother apparently taught her, and
Oh,
then
really? Okay.
yeah, and like I was over here like, but you didn't teach me. So,
That's funny.
but, so
That kind of stuff actually creeps up on me a lot. It's just like,
yeah.
given especially now, given how much I'm struggling to learn. I'm
Uh-huh.
actually learning Spanish and Japanese at the same time
Oh wow.
because I've always wanted to be more
Yeah.
fluent in Japanese, of course, because of my own identity. But I'm moving to Mexico soon, and so
Yeah.
I need to learn Spanish, right? Oh my god! Like I'm so old at this point. My brain is just not adapting to the learning very well, and
Mm.
I mean, it's not that I'm not learning. It's just the slowness in thinking. And if I
Yeah.
just had some more exposure when I was younger,
Yeah.
I think it would be a lot easier, at least on the Japanese side. In the
Mhm.
Spanish side, I straight up resisted learning Spanish because I grew up in
Oh,
Southern California, which has a
yeah.
very large Mexican population. My stepmother was
Mhm.
Mexican and we didn't get along. And so when it came time to pick a language to learn in school,
Yeah.
I picked French just so that I wouldn't have to learn
Uh-huh.
anything associated with my stepmom, which
Mhm.
is like a teenage thing. Like I was
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
super. It would have been far more practical for me to learn Spanish when I was in Southern California as a kid, but
Yeah.
I was like, no, I'm protesting against my stepmom. And
Oh
I
no, I
learned
didn't know
French.
that.
I spoke a little. I could
Mhm.
like I traveled to France. I was able to speak it and stuff. And then of course
Oh,
now French is
amazing.
gone
Uh-huh.
because I don't use it.
Mhm.
And here I am, like 45 years old, trying to learn Spanish for the first
Uh-huh.
time when I could have learned it 30 years ago and
Yeah.
would have been fine. But yeah, I get it. I commend
Mhm.
that you're trying to do it too because it's a way of getting a closeness, an understanding to your mother as well.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
And
interesting.
yeah. And yeah, it's been great. I've only known Colombia through stories before visiting
Mm,
it. And just without the language, I know there's like a barrier that I'm only experiencing on very
mm,
surface level. So yeah,
true, yeah.
learning the language is very important for me.
I,
So, and you said you're learning it later, but I just want to say there's language is never too late to learn.
no,
So
I
I think it's
absolutely, yeah.
uh-huh,
And if I can move around the world and pick up languages as I go,
uh-huh,
like that would be sort of an ideal thing
hmm,
to me.
that'd
I'd
be
like to
amazing.
spend a few years in different countries at a time to kind of,
Hmm.
if not gain fluency, at least gain some sort of casual
Yeah.
conversation,
Hmm.
ability. But I've like my whole family comes from different places, and I grew up in the States, and I've been in the States my whole life. And with the exception of like traveling for vacation and stuff like that, I haven't really gotten to experience. Well, in a different way, I haven't been able to
Hmm.
experience being the non-dominant culture
Hmm.
in a place for an extended period of time. That being said, I am also a member of the non dominant culture in the country I was born in. So
Hmm.
I guess it's a combination of where I guess language being a major part of that, not being,
Hmm.
the native, not speaking the native language of the area that I'm in is
Hmm.
something that I kind of want to understand because I want to understand better my grandmother's experience,
Yeah.
Lachan's experience coming here and how crazy it was in the 50s to just like
Yeah.
marry a white
Exactly.
guy and move to America, like it just a military guy, but still like it, I can't imagine how bold that was for her
Hmm.
in her time period versus it's not that bold of a move for someone in my time period, to just pack up and
Hmm.
move to another country.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's kind of that. It's the adventure aspect of it, I think. But I think
Yeah.
also it's that desire to uh, um, learn and appreciate another country, country's culture where I'm not the focus.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I'm not really the focus here, but I'm also an American citizen who has light skin. I know that I experience some privileges that
Hmm.
even people in my own family, darker skinned people in my own family, don't experience. So
I
I
see.
guess I'm just looking into like a level of extra empathy that I can gain for the
Mm-hmm.
people I'm related to who did that, who
Yeah.
moved to different countries. My mother has lived, because of military, my mother lived in Turkey and Japan and the Philippines and stuff when she was younger. My
Hmm.
father, because of the military, was born in Germany. You know, to have all these international people around me and really not have the same experience. This is just my version
Yeah.
of trying to experience what they had.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I think also the appeal as a mixed person to go
Hmm.
somewhere
Hmm.
else, like, and tell me if you feel like this, because I don't
Hmm.
know if it's just something I'm doing in my head, is that in the States, I'm mixed. I'm
Uh-huh.
mixed because I'm ambiguous in my presentation. You
Uh-huh.
can't look at me and say, I absolutely know that this person is fill in the blank race, right?
Yeah.
And so I have to tell you what I am. I have to tell
Hmm.
you that I'm black and Japanese and that my fathers, mothers from, Britain and stuff like that, that I have to tell you that, otherwise you won't know.
Mhm.
Whereas when I'm not in the United States, I'm an American. And that
I
is
see.
so bizarre to me because American culture is not like that. Well, at least,
Mhm.
okay, for brown
Yeah.
people, you don't walk around being like, I'm an American, I'm an American. So I don't
Yeah.
really feel an American identity
Mhm.
until I leave the country. And when I leave the country and I'm told I'm American, my first reaction is to always say no, which is very strange because
Mhm.
I understand I was born in the U.S., so I'm
Yeah.
U.S. American at least, or
Uh-huh.
North American, or however, depending on which countries call us what.
Mhm.
Because I lead with my ethnicities. I'm Black and Japanese and English and Welsh and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I'm curious to see how my Americanness starts to fade over time
I see. Uh-huh.
in terms of just like the citizenship or maybe not the citizenship, the nationality of myself. I don't
Mhm.
think of myself as really having a nationality. I do think
Yeah.
of even though I have one, obviously.
Mhm.
I think of myself as very ethnic and culturally bound.
Yeah.
So like in your case, having
Mhm.
grown up in two places,
Mhm.
do you feel Japanese in the States and American in Japan?
I think that's a good question. And for me, the Japanese identity is just very solid and fixed.
Okay.
So when I'm in the US or lived and grew up after 15 years old, the way I view it is that I was a Japanese person, experiencing all these like key capstone moments in life, like coming of age and graduating, so on and so forth. And so it doesn't. I think in the sense that that Japanese identity was something that was very solidified once I moved to the U.S.
Okay.
is true,
That makes sense. Yeah.
but yeah. But that was more of a kind of a realization of or knowing more of something I learned about myself, and not necessarily not the mindset that influences me by the environment,
I see. Yeah.
if that makes sense.
No, yeah. Because a lot of times our like the way we identify and the way we're identified externally don't
Yeah,
match up,
yeah,
and sometimes with mixed kids we end up just defaulting with what other people tell us because
I
it's
see.
you know I guess like in the story that you told earlier, get me out of this situation.
Hmm.
Okay, fine, I'll just agree.
Yeah.
And in doing that, you kind of take a chunk out of yourself.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I think as we get older, or as mixedness is now a subject that can be talked about a little bit more
Yeah.
openly, us being more fixed in our identity, not fixed. I still want to say that identity is very fluid, but being more
Hmm.
fixed in I tell you what my identity is, not you
That's
tell
right.
me what my identity is. I think that
Hmm.
comes with like time,
Yeah.
challenges, overcoming, thinking through, all that
Hmm.
kind of stuff. Yeah, so I know it's tough work. I know and I know sometimes it just
Hmm.
sucks. But
Yeah.
having access to more things,
Yeah.
we just do.
No, I agree. And it's been a really amazing gift that I could appreciate as an adult, to have my mother's background, to have my father's background, life stories, and family history. So I'm very grateful and very happy to be born the way I was.
Yeah,
So
that's good.
mhm.
I certainly hope people are happy with being mixed because
Yes.
there's so many people I've spoken to over the years where
Yeah.
it's tough because they live in such isolation, or they're the only
Yeah.
member of their family maybe that's mixed, and without having a whole bunch of people in your own family understand your
Hmm.
deal, like that can be very
Hmm.
difficult, which is why I think developing mixed community is so important. um,
Absolutely.
when you are in Japan,
Hmm.
is there a way to like create community with other hafu, like other people that do you know other mixed folks when you're there?
I do. I've met a lot of mixed folks, and this was very in contrast to my upbringing, where I was in a very, it was a public school, so I imagine maybe other mixed people might have arrived later in life to Japan. I could also foresee a case where other mixed people or the parents of mixed children might also have the choice of either having the children be in a public school or international school. So I imagine those might be some of the reasons I didn't understand or didn't see other mixed people
Right.
growing up.
Well, I mean, it's good that there's at least a chance
Uh-huh.
of being able to connect. I do watch a lot of YouTube, like mixed people living in Japan type
I see.
YouTube
Uh-huh.
things, just to get an idea, because I do hope to go there at least for a little
Yeah.
while at some point. And it does seem like the people that I follow, they don't know other mixed people, but what they end up creating community with is foreigners.
I see.
Like, you know, because maybe they have a non-Japanese parent, and so it's just easier for them to be in community with other foreign-born people who are living in Japan.
I see.
But it would be nice to know that there's like a little mixed group that you could like you can meet with on the weekends or something. I don't
Uh-huh.
know.
Yeah.
Well, we are coming a little bit near the end, so I
Okay.
just want to ask you before we get out of here, because you know, online and offline, we've talked about some things that are a little bit difficult about maneuvering as a mixed person, but what is something that you love most about being mixed?
The thing I love the most being mixed was the people and places my parents have allowed me to connect.
Yeah, you've seemed to have had like a lot of access to different cultures and different stories and stuff like that. So that's pretty fun. I feel like we're kind of, with that kind of exposure, we become far more empathetic people. Maybe not to say monoracials can't be empathetic, but just that we get so exposed to different cultures and different people and different places. Inside our own families, let alone, just out in the world. So it's a nice opportunity to just be able to see people in this very broad spectrum of identities, which is very nice.
Yeah.
Do you want to share with people how they could find you, or do you want to share on social media? What do you want to do?
Oh, sure thing. My Instagram is Kiki__Rafiki. And I've recently published a book, Python for Chemists. So if you're interested in learning the intersection of chemistry while using Python, please consider.
Coding language, right?
Yes,
Is that
the
Java?
coding
Okay.
language. So
that sounds like something my partner might be really interested in. I'll look that up. I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well, so people can check it out. Well, it was really nice talking to you and getting to know you. For people that aren't familiar with you yet, you've been a follower of Militantly Mixed for quite a while, and some of the other platforms that I also do, I see your presence there as well. So I really just want to say thank you for the support that you've given me and the show for so long, and to finally get a chance to actually chat with you versus just having you as a name behind a screen or whatever is very nice. Plus, also, and I say this all the time, I'm selfishly really excited when I see other people that share my mix, and in particular with Japanese. For me, I guess I'll say that my isolation as a mixed Japanese, I only had my family members to be Japanese with. I didn't start having like Japanese friends or mixed Japanese friends until I was quite a bit older. And so for me, it's just always exciting to be like, oh, you might understand this thing that I do with, or like, there's topics that I talk about in very Japanese ways because I grew up with my Japanese grandmother, but American kids don't get. And so it makes me feel very non-American, I guess, in my place. So it's always nice to connect with other mixed Japanese. So hopefully we'll stay in contact.
Yeah.
So we can be Japanese together.
That would be amazing. Please let me know if I could help with any Japanese learning, and yeah, I want to thank you for creating a mixed space online for mixed people to be heard and represented. It's a really amazing show that you're running.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Militantly Mixed is a ManeHustle media podcast, produced and hosted by me, Sharmane Fury. Music is by David Bogan the One. You can follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Militantly Mixed. If you'd like to become a sponsor of Militantly Mixed, please go to patreon.com/militantlymixed for monthly sponsorship or paypal.me/militantlymixed for a one-time only donation. And if you like what you hear on Militantly Mixed, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to be your mixed-ass self.
ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.